Welcome to the Heartland Journal's Tennessee podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and pass it around. Just hit that little bell button. We only grow with your help, and thanks for doing it. On this show, we are focusing on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with special guest, Republican Representative Jody Barrett. Born 1973, Jody is married with 3 children, an attorney, and graduated with a BA in history from Lincoln Memorial University in 1996 and a JD from University of Mississippi School of Law 1999. Ole Miss, go Tony the Lion Shark. It was Colonel Reb when you were there. Rebel Black Bear for a while in between. Rep. Barrett is on the Commerce Committee, Disaster Relief Committee of Extraordinary Session, Education Committee, Immigration Committee of Extraordinary Session, Naming and Designing Committee, we'll talk about that, Business Utility Subcommittee, Education Instruction Subcommittee. He's a Dixon Housing Authority attorney, Industrial Development Board, School Board, Delinquent Tax, Emergency Communications Board attorney, and Tennessee State Independent Athletic Association board member, and a hell of a golfer. He won his first race for Assembly 78.4 to 20. That's an ass whooping, folks, and won re-election 100%. Yeah, I wouldn't want to challenge you either. Fresh off his 100% rating and the first ever perfect score on legislative report card, first and only in Tennessee history for 2025, earning recognition as one of the most conservative legislators the state has ever seen. That's how you get to be a third-time guest on Heartland Journal, twice when we were called Mill Creek View. Episodes 87 and 169, folks. How are you today, Jody?
I'm doing great. Glad to be with you.
Thanks for coming back. It's always nice to get somebody who is as dedicated to the cause as you are. So thanks for coming again. Legislative report card, first and only in Tennessee history for 2025, earning recognition as one of the most conservative legislatures in the state that has ever been seen. What does winning that mean to you?
It was a shock. Obviously, you don't go about doing your business to try to meet one of those bars or earn something like that. And I've been high in their rankings the first couple of years I was up there. This is just one of those strange years where I think it became very clear legislatively as the bills were coming through. I think I found focus on where I stood and on different issues. Certainly found a new connection, a deeper connection with my constituency as well. You know, the fight over the vouchers and different things. It drew me closer to the folks back home, and so it just made it easier for me to listen to them and vote the way they wanted me to vote.
So you're a little younger than me. I was alive actually during Reagan's last term. What is it that makes you, this young guy from Middle Tennessee, so conservative?
Well, I think there's a lot to do with that. I mean, most of it's being just the way I was raised and the community I was raised in. You know, I was born in Hickman County and then lived most of my childhood and adolescent life in Dixon County. Lived there until I graduated high school. And then, 10 years later with college and law school and then, having a wife and expecting a new child, I moved back in 2001 because that's where I wanted to raise my family too. Having been away for 10 years and looking at options for what to do when you're having a newborn child getting ready to come into the world, you start looking at the world in a different way. It becomes less about you and even you and your spouse and what your needs are, and more about what you can provide for your kids. And so it's just a great community, and that's why I wanted to come back. And because of that, I think I made that decision because of the experience I had, and it made me who I am today. Obviously my wife and I are Christians and we attend First Baptist Church, have been active in the church our entire adult lives ever since we've been back in Dixon. And that drives a lot of who I am as well and how I view things and how I view the world. So the conservative part of me and how I got there is really, I don't know that it's a decision that I made. I think we all kind of go through college and have some of those liberal ideas that are pushed at you. I'll tell anybody, I voted for Bill Clinton in '92. So I wasn't some raging Republican that goes around telling everybody I was a Republican when everybody else was Democrat. Most people that are telling you that are probably not telling you the truth.
Right.
And especially here in Tennessee when, we were really Democrat until about 11, 12 years ago. And a lot of people that are telling you now that, oh, I'm a Republican, I've always been a Republican, maybe that's not entirely true.
No, that's for sure.
But as we've seen, the parties have shifted and things have changed. The Democrats of today are not what they were when I was growing up in Tennessee. There are no yellow dog Democrats. There are no real conservative Democrats anymore.
They used to be called blue dog Democrats. There aren't any of those either, which were the fiscally conservative ones.
And so now
that's actually a good quote. So if you are the most conservative ever, and I know this report card hasn't been around for 200 years like Tennessee has, but let's just say that's the standard, and you're 100, first time ever, some of the people you work with up there, one of them went to divinity school. One of them comes from Oakland, California. Same guy comes from Oakland, California. He would probably be a 0. They don't rate the Democrats, but they're down there. Where do you think, and you're the same age, where do you think the disconnect is between a Tennessee Democrat and a conservative Tennessee Republican is?
Well, there's a lot of disconnect, but there's also some similarities. So for instance, Representative Harold Love Jr., same age as me, 50-ish, 51. We graduated, I think, both in 1992. He grew up in Nashville. I grew up in Dixon. He's a Democrat. I'm a Republican. He's a minister's kid, raised in the church, has a lot of similar philosophical ideas as I do about religion and what role that plays in our personal lives. But we have different views socially about politics and government and what role government plays. And so, a lot of, I'd probably tend as a conservative to lean more toward my liberal side, my libertarian side of the Republican Party. And because of that, I'm strongly in favor of less government involvement in our personal lives. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see a smaller government. I'd like it to spend less money. All of those things, all the things that we talk about wanting D.C. to change and change our federal government, I just want to see the same things here in Tennessee. And so when I'm sitting here now 3 years into this as a state legislator, and I see that our budget has doubled in the last 8 years, more than doubled in the last 8 years, there's some things a lot of things we're doing right, and it's good for us as Republicans in Tennessee to pound on our chest and pat ourselves on the back because we've done a lot of good. But there's also some things that we're not necessarily following what the people want us to do. And
it doesn't appear from outside very collegial. You would think that we always hear about the Good Old Boy Network, and we hear about conservatives being kind of country club, Better Business Bureau type of click. But could you play golf with Love? Could you play golf with Justin Jones? I know you're big into golf, so let's keep that metaphor going.
Yeah, I don't think Justin Jones and I are going to be hanging out anytime soon. But there are a handful of them, of Democrats in the House, at least, that I wouldn't mind going to have dinner with or have lunch with, something along those lines. Justin Jones.
There's only 23 of them.
Oh, I know.
Gloria Johnson you didn't mention her. You're not going to be
Gloria and I are never going to be hanging out. And Justin, the two Justins and Afton, the more progressive wing of that party, we're never going to agree really on anything.
Do you think, since you know them a little bit, are they really as zealots, as ideologue as they appear? Or do you think there really is like Reagan and Tip O'Neill were diametrically opposed? Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House, came from Boston, Massachusetts. Reagan was this outsider from California, the Hollywood actor, whatnot. But same age, both Irish, both Catholic, like to drink a little bit. They could shake hands after the debates were done and hang out collegiately.
Right.
Do you think you mentioned Afton Ben. I wouldn't want to spend quality time with her because I don't like what she says, but do you think really behind the scenes they're just more moderate?
Oh, no. No, I don't think they're moderate at all.
Why don't they live in Boston then? Why do they live in Tennessee?
I don't know that. I don't, obviously Afton is from Tennessee and I think she grew up in Knoxville or somewhere along those lines.
Gloria's from Colorado. I get that.
Yeah. I just think people get pigeonholed into a philosophy or an ideology that either they have been dragged into that ideology or coerced into it, and then they find themselves, once they're in that world, they can't escape it. There's a real disconnect where people can't see the forest for the trees.
So these are then real Democrats, because obviously Matt Murphy and I have a little standing joke dialogue. He doesn't believe there's such a thing as a rhino. I fully do believe there is them, and I can cite chapter and verse of all the ones I've ever had to deal with, especially in a liberal town. Do you think these are not dinos? These are hardcore Democrats that would just as well work with a illegal alien NGO or a Planned Parenthood as they would a conservative member of the business community in their district?
No, I think they're activists. I don't think they're Democrats. I think they're activists, and really progressive activists. Almost, they almost want anarchy. They're anti-government to a large extent.
From inside the government, they're anti-government. So the man wants no man.
Well, and if you think about where particularly Afton and the two Justins came from, they were activists before they got into the legislature. They were up there protesting everything they could protest, and
they were the same community organization together.
Correct.
All three of them, yeah.
So they went from being on the outside of the doors chanting and screaming to now coming to the inside of the chamber, chanting and screaming. And so
I'm old enough to remember when the AFL-CIO presidents and vice presidents decided to run for office and actually get inside the state houses and deal with this. Right. And they ruined Seattle for it. So this is what is happening if they had the chance.
It is an infiltration to a certain extent. Now, granted, in Tennessee, they don't really have much of a chance of building it, getting any type of toehold of power.
For now.
But for now, right. But this is how it starts, right? You get one little crack, and then they start exploiting wherever they can. And, it was just the two Justins. Now it's the two Justins and Gloria and Afton. And next thing you know, and then they just brought in another one from Memphis that came in this last cycle as well. And she hasn't quite gotten her voice yet.
Charlene, I believe?
No, Selena.
Oh, Selena.
And so she hasn't quite found her voice yet, but she will. And, so they're slowly taking over control of the House Democratic Caucus.
Right. And you don't have to do it with bullhorns. You can do it systematically, seat by seat by seat.
And there's a real fight. There's a real fight going on within that caucus. We all know it. And you can sit back and watch it happen, particularly on the floor when there's, heated battles and things that they're philosophically opposed and they don't like the way their caucus leadership is handling things.
And so those are the overt ones. So very, very clear. They are a super minority. They could all get in a van, Scooby van, drive to Colorado, hide out for a vote, and you all in Republicanship would still have a quorum and be able to pass anything. You don't even have to talk to them. They can make all the headlines they want on Channel 5. Nobody cares. But what we do have a problem is the Rhino Nation or Rhino Radio, because what happens is obviously you can get a Democrat to run for any office they want and just say they're a Republican because of an R plus 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, if it was Knoxville, and still go in there and start voting with the other side for their 2, 4, 6 years, however long they're going to be there. So I know you love golf, so we're going to stick with the golfing metaphor, but in par terms, Monty Fritz got a 99. That is pretty close to perfect. You got 100.
I clipped him by one.
You've got ahead by one. Todd Warner, 96. Newcomer Michelle Renaud, 95. Do you think they were as good as you vote by vote? And what do you think made the difference between 1 point for Monty and 5, say, behind Michelle?
Well, I mean, that's a question for the folks that run that website and how they do their scoring. I know they had some group of legislation, 100 plus different bills that they were monitoring. And the scoring part of this was based on your vote on those bills that they were watching. So it's objective in that it's taking the same slate of bills and comparing everyone's votes on those. I think if you dig into that data a little bit, you'll probably see that there were some bills that maybe I was absent on and didn't vote, or vice versa, the other members that you mentioned. So it may not be exactly apples to apples just based on the collection, though. The overall data of what they had and what votes I had, that's what the score came out to be.
So not one standardized test where everybody was equal. It was, you did what we wanted you to do. We can rely on you when necessary, and maybe Michelle was absent for 2 or 3 and it would have been exactly the same.
Right.
Okay.
And I think if you look at it too, at the list, I think it's kind of fair in that I think anybody that's in the 90 and above is doing good work. I mean, they're
so
really
I like a Liberty score where you get an A, not a number. Because when you put a number on it, it's sort of like, well, wait, I got 95 out of 100. Where did I go wrong on those 5?
Right.
I need to take that test over again. But they did have A-listers. All have been on the show, interestingly enough. Todd, Monty, Gino Bolso, Senator Bowling, and Memphis's Brett Taylor, Michelle. That's enough to make a Freedom Caucus right there. I interviewed South Carolina and Wyoming Freedom Caucus chairman, and they said they tried to form one here, but weren't enough conservatives, believe it or not. Gino sat right there and said the supermajority of Republicans didn't need a Freedom Caucus because they are a Freedom Caucus. I don't know. Do you agree with Gino? We are so red of a legislature, we don't need populist conservatives to counter the progressive establishment type Republicans? Well,
that's a good line. I like where Gino's head's at. And our caucus would like me to say that. I think, personally, there's a little bit of an issue with the supermajority. And I'll get lambasted for saying this, but the fact that we have 75 members that are Republican out of 99 is great, but it's also a problem. And the problem is that you only need 50 votes to pass a piece of legislation, which means literally by the numbers, you could pass a piece of legislation while ignoring 1/3 of your caucus. That's not healthy. And that doesn't make for a lot of spirited debate or compromise. That makes for an establishment that has control of that caucus to be able to pretty much push through whatever they want.
It actually can get uglier than that, and you know it, and I'm going to tell everybody so that you can expound on it. You don't need that many votes. You need the committee. And so
100%.
In my favorite example is Gino. His Trump Act, which I thought was great, came down to a committee vote. It was voted on 2-2. Because it was a tie, it failed. 3 of the members decided they didn't want to show up. They were there, but they didn't come in and vote. And so it could have gone 3-2 and 1. It could have been 5-2 or whatever it is, and been a blowout. And that's because I believe the floor would have voted for all of it.
Sure,
but it never
absolutely.
got to see the light of day. So who controlled all that, and how do you feel about that? Where the committees are really the chokehold, the bottleneck on legislation that actually Tennessee needs bad.
Well, and that's where the speaker's power is really flexed, in that the speaker really controls all the committees, the committee assignments, who sits on them, even what committees are. Like, he can come in at the beginning of a session and say, well, we're going to create this new committee or a new subcommittee to handle these type of pieces of legislation. So every 2 years, as the speaker gets reappointed, he gets to try to kind of set the table, so to speak, for how we're going to play the game.
It's a lot of power for one guy.
Sure. So I think you saw after Roe versus Wade was overturned, there was a new subcommittee created called Population Health Subcommittee under the Health Committee. And that committee was designed strictly to handle anything that had to do with abortion and dealing with the trigger ban. And ever since that committee's been in place, there's been this constant effort to try to weaken the trigger ban in Tennessee, weaken the ban that we have on criminal abortion, which seems counterintuitive to, as you say, a supermajority, super red state. And so that's a subcommittee that I've got a bill that will be coming before next year that I know I'm going to have a hard time getting anything out of it. But
it seems like when you talk like that they've forgotten who got them there, right? That's a little bit like a club or kind of a clique, whereas the Dixon voters or the Blount County voters or the Knox County voters sent those people there for what they believe in, they probably didn't like how that all played out. And now we had a big one, and you were right there at the ground zero, public education.
Mm-hmm.
You were on the education committee. I read it right off of there. It's not one of those confusing names.
But not on the education committee in the special session.
Exactly my point. So they decided not pre-session. They decided in the middle of session to create a new subcommittee with votes that they pretty much knew they had and moved you off, even though you are sent there by your people for education. You're a lawyer for the education system. Tell us about that. How'd that feel? What'd you do about it? And I know you just didn't roll over and take it.
Well, so first let me go back and say what I stand for on the vouchers and on school choice, because there's a lot of people trying to put words in my mouth and say that I'm something that I'm not. I am for school choice. The one thing that you didn't mention in the bio is that I'm a homeschool dad. All three of my children have been homeschooled from beginning to end. One's already graduated college, one's getting ready to graduate in December, and I've still got a high schooler now who's just finished elementary school, just turned 14, or junior high, just finished 8th grade, be going to high school next year. I am for school choice. I am for parents having ultimate control over their educational decisions and choices for their children. What I'm not for, though, is a giant publicly funded, taxpayer-funded public benefit that is really not benefiting 80% of the state. It's only going to benefit a small percentage, comparatively speaking, of people that have opportunities to take advantage of it. Especially when there are already a program with ESAs in place in the counties that really need this type of opportunity to create freedom, as they call it, for students to be able to move from a failing public school into a different type of educational setting. So, when you're spending $1 billion to get this big bird off the ground, and that's what we spent in the special session in 3 days' time. We gavelled in on Monday, and on Wednesday we voted. We spent $1 billion. That's what it took. All the haranguing and different things that got thrown into the stew in order to get enough votes to get 53 votes to pass this thing. It was $1 billion. Well, now it's going to cost $250 million every year to keep it going. And it's only
that doesn't even count the $600 million for illegal students.
Correct.
Illegal alien students.
Correct. And well, that's another issue. We'll get to that in a second. But we're only serving 20,000 students with that much money. There are 1 million public school students, and only 20,000 scholarships are being created. So what type of freedom are we really creating? I mean, if you've got a prison camp with 1,000 people in it, and you only let 20 of them get out, are you really creating freedom? Or not?
Freedom opportunity, like a choice lane.
Right.
Do you drive on that road and pay the toll, or do you just not drive on it? That's the choice.
Exactly. And so in this situation, the people back home made it very clear. I mean, it was 100-1 in the communications that I received opposed to this. And the large reason why they were opposed to it, I had the fiscal concerns over it and what it's going to cost and what I think it's going to do to our budget over the next 10 years. But for my district in particular, it doesn't offer anything new for us. There's no benefit.
There are no private schools.
We don't have any private schools in my district. There's one in Dixon County, but it's in Mary Littleton's district, and it's small. There's none in Hickman County, none in Lewis County.
And the money doesn't go towards creating new ones.
Correct. Yeah. The other thing that this does not do, which typically speaking, when you're trying to create a voucher program or some sort of school choice program, you're trying to create competition so that the public schools have some sort of competition that drives them to improve and get better.
Preferably better options.
Correct. And so with this bill, what we ended up having to do in order to pass it was put this hold harmless provision in it that says, well, hey, public schools, if you lose any kids for any reason and they transfer out, we're still going to pay you the same amount of money we paid you the year before.
For a phantom child.
Correct. So the problem with that is now, in a worst case scenario, let's say Blue Oval City out in West Tennessee, where we spent hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars to get this thing off the ground. Now we know the EV market's not working. Things are not going right. Something happens and Ford says, we're out.
Yeah,
We're going to pull
delayed it to 2028.
Yeah, but let's say they pull the plug and say, you know what, we're going to move out. Maybe that's 10 years down the road. Maybe it's next year. Who knows? But we've created this new school system and a whole new community down there to support that plant. And we've created a new school system that now has, say, 10,000 students in it. Well, if Ford leaves, it's going to go from 10,000 to 5,000 like that.
But they'll still get their money.
But they're still going to get paid like they have 10,000 students
and where
because
that's even
of this
more
whole harmless
realistic
provision.
is Shelby County, right next door, when they leave for high crime or whatever the case may be to Middle Tennessee, that school that's obviously failed them, just like their city council has and their police department, still going to get phantom money.
And now circle back around to the illegal immigrant children that are being taught in our schools at our expense. Same thing. And this was a conversation we had in committee about the bill that we were proposing to make it where schools didn't have to educate those kids. If we pass that law and schools have an option now to say, well, we're not going to educate illegal immigrant children, or we're going to require them to provide proof of citizenship. Well, if they lose to, let's say, Davidson County Schools suddenly loses 300 or 400 kids, we're not really saving the state, because the hold harmless provision of the voucher bill says even if you lose students for any reason, we're still going to pay you the same amount of TISA funding. So
and that's on top of the bribe, they called it, for teachers to go along with this, which they even didn't go along with it anyway.
Right. So right here in Williamson County, let's say that they decided we passed the bill that says that Williamson County could require students to provide proof of citizenship. And as a process of that, Williamson County weeds out 200 or 300 students. Well, Williamson County is going to get paid the same amount of money regardless. So we're not really saving the state any money from the TISA fund. We're still going to have to pay the same amount of money to the public schools. So
this is the exact same mentality as what Seattle just passed, where if you go on strike, which the teachers will, they get paid.
Right.
They get paid almost like unemployment. So why not when you have to go to school and get beat up by somebody? All right. There's a lot to talk about there, but it's done deal. It's going to happen, and it is happening as we speak. The fabric of what makes Tennessee red, it perceived by the rest of the country, even me when I was looking around, where do I want to live, and I wanted the reddest I could get. Do you agree that we are as red as Montana, Nebraska, and Florida?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, in different ways. Montana obviously is seeing some influx of people from California and the West Coast that's really starting to change some of their cities as well. But the West has a different idea. The West has always been more libertarian. When you go and I've traveled a lot, so I've been around Wyoming and Western Colorado and Montana, and the people out there are very independently minded. Ranchers, farmers. When you live 100 miles from the nearest Walmart and hospital, and you're not expecting the government to come help you.
Yeah, they don't want conservative government. They want no government.
That's right.
But not chaos.
Because they're used to that. And that's the way that they want to live. Tennessee, we're a little bit more densely populated, so it's maybe not quite the same mentality. But we're a southern state that has a history of being suspect of government involvement in our lives. So, we have the same desire for a small government, a smaller, less intrusive, limited government and what it does to our day-to-day lives. But we're also seeing the same thing. We're seeing an influx of people that are moving in here because it looks good on the outside. And we're doing some of that to ourselves. I mean, we've got 3% unemployment across the state. I think the latest report that came out, I think 90 out of 95 counties or 89 out of 95 counties have 5% unemployment or less. Yet we're continuing to recruit more businesses and more industry, which also just brings more people in. I mean, if we bring somebody in that's going to build another car manufacturer that's going to hire 400 or 500 people, then all they're going to do is raid the other industries in that area, and those industries are then going to have to go find other workers because we
It's
are
like what Amazon did with bookstores, or what Elon is doing to Memphis with supercomputers.
right. So we're flooding the market, which means that people that are chasing those jobs are then moving here from other states, and they're bringing their ideology with them. They're not coming here. Some of them are not coming here. A lot of them are looking for freedom. They're looking for liberty. They're looking for an escape from wherever it is that they're coming from. Some of them are just looking for work,
Right.
and so they're coming here from Chicago and New York and California and different places just because their company moved here. They're not changing their ideology. They're not looking for liberty and a new way of life. They want this place to be like where they came from.
And do you think the legislature is sort of on a trajectory to cater more to that? Because let's talk about John Reagan, Frank Nicely, Todd Warner, who's still there, not treated very well by the reddest of red legislators that are supposed to make up that fabric that the Chamber of Commerce would point to and say, you want to raise your family in Tennessee with Tennessee values, with Tennessee standards. That's those guys, and they bounced him out. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's a lot of outside money and influence, I think. After the vote during this session, after the voucher vote during this session, in a non-election year, for a month, I had ads run in my district by American Federation for Children, which is tied to the Coke industry and Club for Growth and folks out of D.C. So you got D.C. billionaires.
Americans for Prosperity.
And Americans for Prosperity. They're all kind of
Coke-ish.
branched off of the same tree, right?
Yeah, Cokeheads, yeah.
And so, they're spending money in a non-election year during a legislative session to attack a Republican who's one of the most conservative
in the history of Tennessee.
I'll say one of the most conservative members of the legislature. And why? For what purpose? And who okayed that? And, what are you trying to do other than try to intimidate me and threaten me and get me to back down? So I don't even really understand what that was all about.
Well, let's use the example of Frank Nicely then. So he'd been there forever. His family goes back like 200 years. He was a very conservative member, probably would have got 100 if he was there still, or 99 like Monty. And they ran somebody who with no experience at all against him. He wins. I don't know if his constituents would have turned on him like that since they knew him best. And they got what? What do you think they got out of that from the powers that be? What did the Koch brothers want from the new guy that they wouldn't have got from Frank?
Well, they didn't get what they wanted on the school voucher vote because he voted against it.
Right.
The guy that they spent all this money making Frank out to be the bad guy, and this guy's going to come in and save your kids and vote for school choice, and he voted against it because his district didn't want it.
Right.
To his credit, at least, he still listened to his district and voted the way they wanted. But that's one issue. So there's going to be multitude.
But isn't that interesting? They voted against him with somebody else, even though they wanted what he wanted to give them, which was a no vote. Mm-hmm. That doesn't compute,
right?
In a democracy.
Which makes you question what's going to happen next time when he runs for re-election. Are they going to support him again, or will they pull that money?
So maybe it was a short-term fix, and for long-term they think, okay, I see how that goes. Yep. There's a movie from the 40s with Jimmy Stewart. I wish everyone has seen it or heard of it. Some have, some haven't, but that's a long time ago, and it's 2 hours. So the TikTok crowd won't really like it with our short attention spans. But Jimmy goes to D.C. and learns firsthand how unfriendly Congress is to newcomers. I had John Ritchie on here before he was sworn in as a new member. Brian Ritchie, sorry.
Yeah. And John Ritchie, that's a mashup.
Yeah, that's right. Your buddy John Rich. Mount Richmore. Yeah, what he learned, what the Jimmy Stewart character learns when he's up there is that, Jefferson Smith was his name, is that the club really doesn't want anybody from outside that hasn't been there 30, 40 years, probably very compromised, messing with the system. Did you get the impression Nashville, and this goes back to your first election, wasn't hospitable to the man from Blount County and his conservative ideas, or you from outside Nashville next door?
They hated Brian Ritchie. Our leadership absolutely despised Brian, and mostly because he was unpredictable. Brian was very conservative, no doubt. But Brian also was a little bit of a squirrel in that he would tell you he's going to do one thing, and then there would sometimes be a curveball in there. So, and that was frustrating to leadership for sure.
Was it the vote on Gloria that was the big killer for him? Or?
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was a multitude of things that got him sideways with leadership. But I think it was also just a mentality. I think Brian came in and made it very clear he wasn't there to be friends. He wasn't there to move up a ladder, and he wasn't there to work for leadership. He was there to be a conservative firebrand and try to push us in a more right-leaning way.
And they want the team players.
Absolutely. What I have learned in my 3 short years up there is that establishments are establishment, no matter whether it's an R or a D or whatever it is. If you're in power, your desire is to maintain power, and the way you maintain power is have compliance from the minions underneath. And so it runs very much, in my opinion, it's particularly this year, as with some of the stuff that I had to deal with, it's being run like a labor union. Labor bosses want all the members, they make you pay dues. And even though you pay dues, you don't really get a say as to what's going on and what the negotiations are with the company. And you have to fall in line and do whatever they say. And if you don't, then you're a scab and you're a bad guy, and we're going to isolate you from everybody else.
Well, that is the secret sauce that Nancy Pelosi was able to corral the Democrats in. I remember when I was young, you said you voted for Clinton in your first term. That used to be like herding cats. They were the ones that were sea turtles here, world trade here. They all saved the whales here. They were just a crazy gaggle of geese. And then she comes along for basically 40 years and got them all to vote exactly the same way every single time, no matter what it was, whether it was a conservative or even war, which they were all anti-war in the 60s. So that's what you are describing. That is not the way Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan ran. That is the way Ford, Bush, the split in the Republican Party ran. Do you think that Tennessee and their supermajority is getting to a point now where the split could be so divisive that you may actually lose the majority?
It's possible.
Maybe not lose the majority of Republicans, but lose the majority of what you just said, the establishment that has other ideas than guys like you. Could you see a Freedom Caucus type movement become 50% of the caucus and therefore strengthen it for conservative values as opposed to what we've seen with the pro-business and the pro well, there's some social issues in there too that are strange.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to in my opinion, to the Tea Party movement that took place a decade or more ago, where the establishment just tried everything it could to crush that, and it really caused the Republican Party nationally to lose its way, so to speak. I think the blowback on the Tea Party movement is really what brought us Obama.
Mm-hmm. And Trump ultimately.
And everything that's happened since then, and Trump as well, who's also an anti-establishment, anti-Republican establishment candidate. The whole MAGA movement is anti-Republican establishment, which is funny to watch some of these guys now try to say that they're MAGA.
Right.
I do think that there is what's been going on, and if we continue down this road of browbeating people into submission or attempting to browbeat them into submission, they are going to drive people away. They're going to leave folks like me with no other choice but to dig my heels in and bow my back and speak up and fight back. I don't want to be an anti-team player. Never have been my whole life. I've always been somebody that's been a part of a team.
But if you woke up one day and you were playing for the Yankees and your whole career you were, down here for the Braves, sorry, Georgia fans, you would think that you were on the same team as a Republican supermajority red states. But no, actually, these issues are Republican infighting. So like the 11th commandment that Reagan said, thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican. They're not obeying that commandment.
Well,
but they do like to tweak Bible verses.
I would equate it to a football team where a quarterback and a wide receiver are at odds. And so the quarterback decides, I'm not throwing him the ball ever. And I'm going to make him a non-factor.
Even if we lose.
Even if we lose. I don't care, but I'm not going to give this guy I'm not going to allow him to have any success. Those are the words that were used about me during session this year. Very first bill that...
And Todd Warner.
Yeah,
his bills were very important, and they were willing to spike them regardless of the benefit to the people of Tennessee.
Sure.
Because of power.
Very first bill I filed this year was a bill that came from my district, from Hickman County. Citizens that helped write the bill there with a supportive county commission that unanimously passed a resolution supporting the bill.
Right. So not Jody's bill. This was your county's bill.
This is my county's bill. Right. To protect the Duck River and put it in the Class 2 scenic waterway protection.
When they took the $9 million away from it.
Right. Well, that's another story. But the point is, that wasn't my bill. I was just the vehicle for the people of my district.
They elected you a leader of their district.
The folks that brought that bill to me and that were trying to work it in the committee and get support came to me very early on in February and said, hey, we've been told that this bill is dead on arrival if you're the sponsor of it, and we've been told from high up in leadership that you are not going to be allowed to have any success this year. So that's why I say it's like a quarterback who says, I don't care if we win or lose, I'm not letting that guy dance in the end zone.
Yeah.
So,
or like Bill Belichick saying, Tom Brady, you're going to sit, even though you're, a hugely successful, popular guy that wins games for us,
right?
Because my sister-in-law wants to start as quarterback for the.
If you want to go back to the baseball analogy, and not to say that I'm Babe Ruth or the best player ever.
They say you are. You're 100%.
Right. But it'd be like saying, well, I'm mad at Babe Ruth, so I'm going to make him sit the bench during the World Series. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah. Scottie Pippen in the championship against.
And that's the issue when you let personal issues and you're trying to teach a lesson or prove a point or something take precedent over doing the work that the people elected us to do.
No, it's certainly a tyranny, more like a fiefdom than it is a legislative body. Let's talk about how you were on the education committee, responsible for Tennessee schools. You're on there with Lee Reeves now, Gloria Johnson, who you troll on Twitter expertly, I might add. Thank you. Gino Bolso, next door here in Brentwood. How could leadership with the biggest public policy issue of our time, school choice, just up and create a new committee with friendly votes Governor Lee wanted and not even have you on it? And it's literally, he campaigned 8 years ago. He's term limited out the next year, but he's got one session left unless he wants a summer session. 10 for 10. Tennessee's 10 for 10. 10 issues for Tennessee. The only one on there was school choice that he's actually accomplished that I can think of. The other 9, I forget them because he didn't do it. We have an election year, so next session is Lee's last unless he wants, like I said, a summer session. What do you think the legacy of Bill Lee will be for Tennessee, and do you think treatment of committees like that, well-established committee, you're already on it, all the work was done, we're just going to put you on pause, create a new one, get the votes, move on, billions spent without really the voice of the people, let's just say.
Well, that's the whole point of having a special session when we're already in session. I mean, we gavelled into session, regular session on January 14th. The special session was announced the week later, and I think we gavelled in on the 27th, 26th, 27th, somewhere. It was the last week of January.
Through April, yeah.
And so the only reason to do that, there's 2 reasons why you do that. One, you can create whatever committees that you want and put who you want on there to know that you're going to have enough votes. Because if you go backwards to the end of the last regular session of last year, the year before, 24, where school choice didn't pass. It never came out of committee in the House side because the votes weren't there. The people that were members of that committee had issues, had serious concerns.
They all wanted it, just not that bill.
Correct.
Because it was fiscally irresponsible.
There are several members that even voted for the current bill that would tell you that there was a better way of doing it.
So do you think his legacy is shenanigans like that, or is there something more to Governor Lee's 8 years that makes Tennessee more shiny?
Oh no, I think history will look back on the Bill Lee administration and acknowledge that he as governor, called more special sessions than any governor in history, and probably any governor will in the future.
Well, one of them was to give away Ford to Ford.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was guns that didn't happen after Covenant.
Thankfully.
Then there was the special session inside of a regular session, which isn't very special, that did that to you for vouchers, which are going to cost a lot of money after he's long gone.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it? There was a fourth.
They also did one in a very similar January special session that created the third grade retention.
Right. Hold everybody
plan.
back so they're dumber after COVID.
Yes.
How nice.
And so there, the two reasons to do that: A, you can manipulate the committees and put on there who you want to put on there, so that it's going to get out of committee and we're going to have a floor vote on it. And two, it gets done in a matter of days instead of weeks, and so there's no time for anybody to really vet it or fight against it if you're opposed to it. It goes.
Were all four of these one man and telling one legislator what to do, or was there a cabal of them that all said, like, okay, we want this end zone, here's how we're going to play it, and we can't let it be the whole body. We have to kind of tip the scales.
Governor Lee can call a special session, but ultimately the legislature has to act.
Right. They all had to know
we're required by law to respond to it and show up, but we're not required to do what he's asking us to do, which I think you saw in the special session on red flag laws.
Right.
In order for a special session to go the way the governor wants it to go, he either has to have broad support for the initiative that he's trying to accomplish, or he's got to have leadership really pushing it. They've got to be behind it, and they've got to be willing to set the table, so to speak, to ensure success.
So who wanted Ford? Who wanted the red flags? Who wanted the other two more than him? And why him, even if it was his? We don't know.
It's a great question.
So it's a big behind the room thing. Somebody's pulling strings. We just don't know who, but it's costing a lot of money.
A ton of money.
What lessons did you learn in those emergency sessions that he called? We talked about that. Ford has now delayed the EVs, so maybe the money was completely washed away. We don't know.
Trump's removed the mandate for electric vehicles, which is sparking this whole deal with him and Elon right now. But
exactly.
The Trump administration is rolling back all of that stuff that was incentivizing Ford to go build electric trucks in West Tennessee. And look, they're pot committed at this point. They've got billions of their own money in. The state's got billions of our money into Blue Oval City. They're going to produce something there, but it's clearly not going to be electric vehicles. The question just remains as technology changes rapidly now, over the next decade, 2 decades, what happens to the internal combustion engine? What happens to the car industry, period? And
EV sales are down. So the odds are
we're
going to have those a lot longer than we're going to have EVs.
And I think the question you asked, what is Governor Lee's legacy going to be? Well, I think that remains to be seen. I think it's like any investment. We're going to have to let it ride out and look back 10, 20 years from now to see whether or not it was a good investment or not.
I guess what I'm asking too, and that's a great answer, but what is the legacy of how to run that place? Because I don't know if the next governor would have as much, whether it's Marsha Johnson, Glenn Jacobs, whoever it ends up being, I don't think they would have as much force to be able to say, all you 95 counties that come here for 4 months out of the year, and we're only giving you 30 grand, it's not your day job, shut up and do what we say, because we have this aura about us that we get what we want. Right. Now, Randy McNally is like 80-something years old. Don't think he's going to be there much longer. I mean, I wish him all the luck in the world. I hope he's there as long as he wants to be. But the leadership is also going to change. Cameron's young enough, he can stick around, but do you really think if you looked out to your next term, they would still be able to play these games?
I think a lot of it's going to depend upon who the next governor is and the mentality. 26 is going to be a big year for Tennessee, and I think it's going to bring a lot of changes with it, or maybe none at all, depending upon who gets into the governor's office. What we've seen in Tennessee since Republicans have been in office, we've only had two Republican governors dealing with Republican control of the legislature, and really two different styles. Governor Haslam was a very hands-on guy. He was very he was a wonk, a political wonk. Still is
almost like one of the legislators.
Yeah, it still is. Like he was very involved and would have direct communications and conversations with people and push and cajole and try to get what he wanted and get people to support his initiatives. My personal experience with Governor Lee, this again, just Jody Barrett talking, and is that he has appeared to me to be much more hands off. His staff kind of runs things, and he does have these tax funded lobbyists, as we call them, which are the liaisons for the different departments that are coming in and actively working against legislation that the people of Tennessee elected us to present and vote on, which is frustrating. But he himself has not been as vested in the game. Certainly not with me personally. Like, I don't have a personal relationship with the governor.
Yeah, he seems like he floats it out there and then lets it all kind of come out. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. If it does, it does.
Right. Well, and I think he has general ideas of concepts and things like school vouchers. I think he said, "Hey, I want school choice and I want a plan," and this is what came of that. But I don't know that it necessarily came from his heart and his mind, and he wrote it out and said, "This is the way it has to work." Mm-hmm. I think he, tasked his people to say, "Hey, go come up with a plan."
The idea of taxpayer-funded lobbyists is kind of crazy too. I mean, that's not a 50-state thing. You'd think that's normal. Yes, there are SEIU members up in D.C. that lobby. That's kind of a public-private situation. But in Tennessee, that's a big dang deal. Do they run the show?
You have state employees making six figures that are their job is to work against legislation that the people you elect to the legislature have written and filed and are trying to get passed because your district has asked them to do this. And these folks are paid.
They pay for as well.
These folks are paid with your tax dollars and directed by the executive branch to go and fight against those issues and those items.
So we pay you to go up there to do that for us. We pay them to do that against us. So really, we're cutting our own throats. We're paying
100%.
Unless they all agreed. Now, if it was all like, we want a bourbon tax, okay, got it. But if we don't, then there's a conflict there.
And that's the disconnect, between. That's where I think there's a real crossover that we need to get a handle on between.
Can we ban that?
Between the executive branch and the legislative branch? Like, the legislative branch needs to be more assertive in what our role is in government under the Constitution.
Right. Can't be going out to bourbon and steak dinners with a public employee to tell the public elected official not to vote a certain way. That's just...
well, and I don't know so much that is we don't have to allow them to come into our committees and do these things.
Right.
But we do it because it's a Republican governor and we're giving him the respect of letting his people come and work against our own bills. We don't have to do that.
Can you make it illegal?
Our leadership has decided to do that. Yeah, I mean, we could change our House rules. It doesn't even have to be a law. We could just change House rules on the way those things work.
But nobody's going to do that.
But correct.
How do you think he handled COVID and his emergency powers? I was glad to see the legislature, looked at that and corrected it a little bit for next governor. But do you think the assembly was too quick to give away their rights?
That was one of my bills, by the way.
Oh.
I was not allowed to present any bills in committee this year. That was my punishment.
Basically, benched you.
Yes. As I say, they're not going to throw the ball to me. You're not going to be allowed to score any touchdowns. So I ended up having to take 3 of my bills and have someone else sponsor them, take my name off, allow them to step up as the prime sponsor. And one of them is the emergency powers bill that Rusty Grills passed. That does limit the governor's emergency powers now to say specifically in statute that he cannot violate your individual constitutional rights just because he's declared a state of emergency.
Doesn't that sound odd, though? Like, if you weren't in the legislature and all of a sudden you woke up one day and said, wait a minute, my elected official, mine happens to be Lee Reeves, can't carry a bill that I and my neighbors all are interested in because he made someone mad.
Right.
And then he has to go and tell me, hey, Steve, you should probably call ABC from another county because he is a person that they'll listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was something like, and this is real world, let's get the fluoride out of the water because it's a neurotoxin. It was just proven by the NIH, and California did it, Utah did it, Florida did it. Why not Tennessee be first? Well, no, can't, because you gave it to the wrong person, not because we have 88% of our water supply in this whole state that will make you sick and knock IQ points off kids. So why give them free school and options when they're dumb already from the water they're drinking, right, et cetera. Does that sound like a Republican state?
Well, it's hard to be a representative and represent the 70,000 people that have elected you if the people that are in control of the legislature are telling you that they're not going to allow you to do that. Essentially,
Yeah. They told you stay home. You're not invited.
Pretty much. Yeah.
We're gonna have a party over here, but you can't come. Neener.
And the way they did that, they didn't vote any of my bills down. They just didn't allow them to be called by the committee. So I can put a bill on notice and say, hey, I'm going to be there next week and I want this bill to be heard. And then I show up and it's on, let's say it's number 12 on the list of bills to be heard. Well, they get through with number 11 and then the committee chairman just goes, well, we're going to move down the list to number 20 now. And, they just skip it around to where you never get called.
That's almost the same thing as flipping someone's microphone off in the middle of a speech like he did. So now we're talking about Cameron Sexton, though. We're not talking about Lee, unless Lee called him and said, jump to 22. We don't want this. I mean, who knows how this stuff is working. But, the left likes to say, you Republicans, you dirty Republicans, you don't pass laws, you pass lawsuits. You probably heard that many times, right? It's very clever, nice bumper sticker. But Jack Johnson told us on this show, most of the 1,000 to 2,000 bills filed each session, which you'd think your two could find their way in there just to see what the other people think. Most of those, half of those are trying to undo stuff Democrats did when they ran the place for 150 years. Okay, I understand that. But do you agree the lawsuits they're referring to are their own, trying to stop you guys from cleaning up their mess? If they wouldn't be lawsuits if they didn't file them.
Yeah, so the lawsuits that they're talking about are being filed by the ACLU and Planned Parenthood. So I don't really have any sympathy for them in that regard. And of course there's been this spat with Metro Davidson County and Nashville, and we're seeing some of that even boil up now over the ICE detentions.
Yeah. And they can cut the council in half now.
Right, and they love to celebrate when they take the initial lawsuit and file it, go to a district court in front of a friendly judge and get an initial ruling, and they all run to the cameras and say, as you say, the Republicans don't pass laws, they pass lawsuits. Well, nobody comes back around when it goes to appeals or the Supreme Court and they get smacked down and we win. We're not going around and rubbing it in their noses. We're just going about and moving on to the next thing that we're going to get passed.
But you should.
Well, you're right. There should be more of that to where we demand that people take notice that, look, what we're doing is right. And as much as I sit here and talk about my frustrations with my own leadership and some of the things that we've gotten cross about, 90 to 95% of the stuff that we're doing is great stuff. Mm-hmm. And we should all be together celebrating that.
Yeah, it is interesting. The things that pass are good. There's so much more that could be done. I mean, I watched the low-hanging fruit, these bills that were up there this very year, like last month. Gino's Trump Act comes to mind, the fluoride in the water I mentioned, even last year's bill banning geoengineering, which was good, but a simple fine for actually breaking that law failed in committee. Right. Lobbyists in every state are very powerful voices. We know that, obviously, but the same ones that do the spraying wanted liability waivers. Didn't get it, but they did in other states, in Florida, South Dakota, for example. So Tennessee stood strong against Big Chem there, but let the dental lobby keep fluoride in drinking water. So tell us your experience with lobbyists. What kind of pressure do you find yourself under sometimes? And I guess if they said he's benched, they wouldn't bother with you, but tell us. And how do they treat you if you vote against what they wanted, like say last year, when it comes up next time? when they want something from you?
I think the vast majority of lobbyists that are working in Capitol Hill are not vindictive. I think they move from one thing to the next.
And we're talking corporate lobbyists, not the public employee lobbyists.
Yeah, now we're talking about ones that are contract lobbyists that are either working for an association or they work with one of the big law firms that
And
they
lobbying
have different
is
clients.
good. If I call you and say, hey, can you get fluoride out of the water? I'm lobbying you technically for the greater good, but there are lobbyists who will twist arms.
Sure, no, absolutely. I mean, that's their job. Is they're hired to gather votes, and to the extent that they have the ability to apply pressure. I mean, most of the time they don't, but I'm sure if they have an opportunity to, they're going to. But my personal experience has been, if they come and talk to me, one, my door's open. I'll talk to anybody. Even ACLU, if they want to come talk to me, I'll listen to them and I'll tell them that they're wrong and I'm not going to vote for their bill. So that part is, there's always good communication back and forth. But really, if you just tell them, hey, I'm not going to vote for this, most of the time they'll leave you alone. Or if you tell them that you are, then they'll move on and try to go work somebody else that maybe is on the fence about it.
And they don't get on their cell phone in the hall and call Cameron and say, Jody's saying no again, darn it, bench him. Like, are they
who knows?
Okay.
Who knows about that stuff? Who's, you never know when you're walking down the hallway, the people you pass by who's patting you on the back or stabbing you in the back. And maybe sometimes it's the same people. Who knows? That's
true. It is politics. It is a game to some. So you don't live in Shelby County or Memphis, which is a problem.
Thank God.
Thank God. But you stepped out and you worked with Senator Brent Taylor and you did something very smart. I come from Seattle and I got to see the inception of this strategy where the bad guys, the NGOs and the activists, they understand that there's a difference between city, state, property, and Department of Transportation. Mm-hmm. If you want to set up a tent and be homeless on Department of Transportation, they won't bother you. If you want to march in the middle of a freeway and risk getting run over by a semi-truck, that's fine because it's Department of Transportation and D.C. is way far away. They started to do it in Memphis, which I call the Seattle of Tennessee because there are really not a lot of differences, including balloting problems. New FBI Director Kash Patel called Memphis the #1 crime city in America. And I already knew that was back and forth for decades a problem. Why'd you have to be the one to help Memphis in the assembly as opposed to, say, John Gillespie or, God forbid, Justin Pearson, the Dem from that area?
You're talking about the highway blocking bill?
Well, just because you know that Antifa is a domestic terrorist, but the state doesn't. They haven't designated him as such.
Well, look, that bill last year we filed in 24, and that was one that I brought to Brent. And Senator Taylor's great. He and I share a lot of the same ideas about legislation, and oftentimes I'll send him an idea or a bill that I think I'm working on, and I'll get a response back of, hey, man, I like your bills. Let's keep working on this stuff. So the highway blocking bill arose out of the stuff that was happening. You're seeing things that were going on kind of an orchestrated thing all over the country 2 years ago of blocking highways and freeways, blocking access to airports and hospitals and things like that, where people were just having sit-ins in the highways. And so in that summer, in that off-season leading up to the 24 session, I started exploring, well, what can we do about that in Tennessee? And so that's where this bill came from. And it just so happened I went to Senator Taylor. He liked the idea. We filed it. The very week that we filed it is when the Antifa protesters in Memphis marched up the interstate ramp and sat on the I-40 bridge over the Mississippi River, blocking access from Arkansas into Tennessee.
Sure did.
And it was manna from heaven for that bill. It was perfect. Well, interestingly enough, so that bill did two things. One, it created a civil right of action where you can sue these people now. So if they have intentionally blocked your access or ability to get to and from, whether that's you suffer damages from you can't get your load to the delivery point on time or you can't get to the hospital and you're injured, whatever the case may be. And so we put the power in the people's hands to where you're not having to rely on a crooked DA in Shelby County who's not going to prosecute these people under any criminal statute. We're giving you the power to sue and drag them in the court. And if we can start
notice it hasn't happened since.
Just like any RICO case, well, it actually has. It happened. It happened again this last year.
Let's get them.
Just like any RICO case, if you start moving your way up the ladder until you eventually get to the people that are funding these people and paying for them to go do it, then we get them in the civil court.
Which I think there was a bill this session that had the NGOs liable for. Did that pass?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it did.
So now we got both arrows in the quiver.
So ironically, at the end of last year with that bill, we had two parts of it. We had the civil right of action, then we also had the criminal act that made it a felony. Well, the felony comes with a cost of incarceration. So every bill that you present is going to have some sort of fiscal cost.
Right.
Well, they put a fiscal note on it. I think it's about $180,000, something along those lines. And then when we got down to budget time, our super red Republican supermajority couldn't find $180,000 in the budget to fund that felony. So I had to amend the bill to take the felony part off to leave just the civil right of action. So that's all we passed last year. So when we come back this year, Senator Taylor said, hey, I don't want to give up that felony. Let's bring that back around and let's get that passed this year.
That's the same thing as the geoengineering $100,000 per instance fine that all of a sudden disappeared in committee. So don't do it, or we'll tell you don't do it again, as opposed to we're going to actually send you a $100,000 bill. Do you think Brent will be successful taking on the Soros DA there, Steve Mulroy, and we can throw in Nashville's Glenn Funk? Channel 5 said, questionable contributions affiliated with controversial billionaire philanthropist about that one.
I don't think if anybody in Tennessee, particularly anybody in Shelby County, thinks that Brent Taylor is going to just suddenly stop or give up or get tired or get distracted, they're wrong. He is going to stick with this until the job's done.
A bulldog.
Yep.
And will it have repercussions in other counties or just his?
I hope so. I hope it sends a message to Davidson County, Knox County, Hamilton. I mean, that's the other thing. You mentioned the crime in Memphis and Shelby County. Really, if you look at the rankings in Tennessee for just about anything, whether it's crime, income, education ranks, all of these things. If you took Davidson and Shelby County out of it, we go skyrocketing up those lists. 95 counties, and really 4 of them are the ones that are the source of the vast majority of our issues.
We really should consider annexing it over to Missouri. I mean, right? We don't need, it's not working.
We can just redirect the Mississippi around it.
Let Elon Musk have the river, you know.
But that's really the issue and the struggle for guys like me who come in representing a rural district. Part of the reason why I am sometimes at odds with my leadership in the majority is because they're trying to pass laws that are directed at issues in 2 or 3 counties, urban counties, that we don't have the same problems or the same issues. For instance, the voucher bill. We don't have the same failing school system and the same issues that they're dealing with in Memphis and Davidson County. So when you have that type of rub where you're trying to pass a blanket law that applies to the entire state just to fix problems in these 2 areas, the problem is you end up with side effects that are unintended consequences for small rural communities. So, for instance, Lewis County is part of the 69th district. It has 11,000 people in it. They're currently building a $40 million brand new high school with only 11,000 people in the county because that's how committed they are to their school. When you get out in these rural areas, the public school system, particularly the local high school, the county high school, there's only one in that county. It's the center of the universe. You know, Friday night lights with football and basketball games, the school plays, the band performances, any community meetings all happen at the school gym, you know, all of that stuff. Well, when you start passing laws to try to create incentives for people to leave their public schools to go to private schools, and there are no private schools in Lewis County, then you're incentivizing people to leave Lewis County and go to Columbia or Lawrenceburg where they can find a private school that might help. And you're breaking down the fabric of these small rural communities. So there's a multitude of reasons why me as a rural legislator, rural representative, has a different viewpoint and perspective than, say, the leadership of our caucus, who's trying to solve a problem for a different part of the state.
Which is why jamming these things down everyone's throat is not a great idea, because there's, Lee is from Williamson County and McNally and Sexton are from right outside of Nashville. So that's not a good thing. And obviously the report card likes how you vote and that perfect score. But how do you think leadership would be scored? That's where it gets interesting.
Well, I'm sure they're on there.
Because we started this conversation about how far extreme the Democrats are from there, and they're a minority and they're not listened to. Now we're talking you inside this party that was benched. Leadership, therefore, is responsible for every damn thing that happens, because they've basically said it's our way or the highway. Okay, is your way successful? Is Lee's legacy going to be one of accomplishment or overspending and like a progressive would, destruction, right? Or does Gloria Johnson have more power and ideology in that Congress than you, or not? And so basically it falls on Lee, Sexton, McNally to answer for that, right? So do you think if you were giving out grades, how would you rate leadership in the reddest of red states?
Well, I mean, I think it's a mixed bag for me personally. I mean, obviously, I'm not happy with the way things have gone this year and the way I've been treated, but it's not just me. I've spoken out on behalf of other members. I was freshman leader 2 years ago when Brian Ritchie was going through some of the same issues, and tried my best to try to be a conduit between Representative Ritchie and leadership. I've stood up and spoke out on behalf of my friend Kelly Kiesling, who was removed as chairman during the special session because he told them that he wasn't going to be able to vote the way they want him to vote. They do a lot of good. Our leadership, it's a tough job. I will readily admit that. Trying to herd 75 cats is difficult. But there are a lot of different coaching styles. You mentioned Bill Belichick earlier. Bill Belichick is not necessarily a player's coach, right? He's a guy that says, we're going to do it this way and this way only, and if you can't do it this way, then you need to get out.
I'll replace you, yeah. Right.
And then there's a whole spectrum of ways of going about that, leadership styles or coaching styles, if you want to call it that. It just depends upon what you like and what you respond to. Just like classrooms and just like students, there are no cookie cutter students, so there shouldn't be cookie cutter classrooms. There's no cookie cutter legislators either. And so treating all 75 and trying to ram them into one round hole is probably not the right way of going about things.
No, I'm going to have to give them a solid B. And I can say that because I'm not an elected official. In Alabama, which I do think is one of the reddest of red states, they got us beat. And if we don't stop it, they're going to also win on property taxes, lowest in the country. But there's only one guy, believe it or not, out of the 5 million that live there that's a billionaire. Just one. Most stuff has to at least run by him before they're ever going to see it. They get a new governor next year, too, maybe Coach Tuberville. If he leaves the Senate, Marsha Blackburn, rumor has it, will leave Senate, too, and run for governor. The richest family here is Frist. Mm-hmm. Sold HCA hospital chains for a lot of money. But he's not the only billionaire. We even have singers that are in the billions at this point, I think. But like Alabama, those folks talk the talk and walk the walk when they use their money. What have you seen the powers that be in Tennessee politics? Who are they? What do they want?
That's a great question. There are a lot of shadowy figures, I think, that are behind the scenes trying to pull strings. Really, I don't know that it's individuals so much as there's just a desire by certain people to move up the ladder, and that desire, people manipulate that. Folks find somebody that has that type of drive and desire and goals to be the next governor or to be the next congressman or to be the next senator. and they use that to their advantage. And Tennessee is, and I don't know the population numbers with Alabama, but I think we're smaller.
They're 5 or 7.
Yeah. So
it's a big state. We got 2 time zones here.
Yeah. But it's a big state, but it's also
Small.
It's small. And people know everybody. People know somebody in every part of the state. I learned that when I was in Mississippi. I went to law school there and practiced law for a couple of years. And in North Mississippi, everybody had a cousin in South Mississippi. Everybody knew somebody on the coast. Everybody knew somebody in Jackson. And it's the same thing here. No matter where you go in West Tennessee, you've got friends or family or cousins that live in East Tennessee in the mountains, or somebody that works in Nashville, or that sort of thing. And so, because of that, it's a tight knit community of people. The volunteer state is a giant small town, I think, and so yeah, I mean, everybody knows everybody. Everybody has some sort of degree of influence, or at least some sort of somebody they know through 2 or 3 different degrees of separation that they can call to try to get something done.
And it used to be part of North Carolina, so it's even more extended than that.
Right, right.
I've been told that most of you all, not you in particular, and I'm not going to name any names, but first term, 100% listen to their constituents. They know how they got there. They call in, they show up, they do town halls, 100%. Second term, maybe about 50-50. Third term, the lobbyists tell them what to do.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, there is, unfortunately. I mean, I think part of it's the money. People that don't fundraise well locally, that end up relying on lobbyist money or PAC money or the caucus fundraisers or whatever the case may be in order to get the money that they need. It's like anything else. You follow the money and you'll find where somebody's, who they're looking to for answers.
Do you think that's out of laziness, where they're like, well, I don't have to fundraise because they're there for me, I'll just listen to them? Or do you think it's something more along the lines of like, well, if I want to be effective, I got to kind of play with that to get my thing? Or what do you think is so corrupting about it? Some
of it is maybe just the community that you're in or the district that you represent doesn't have a lot of money. And so you'd be relying on, you have to get more donors to generate the same amount of money. Say, if I was representing Williamson County, I may only need 100 donors, whereas where I am in the 69th district, I probably need 500 donors to make the same amount to earn the same amount of money, or to collect the same amount of money.
Right. You don't get one Brad Paisley writing a big old check for you type of thing.
Right. Yeah. So some of it's strategy, some of it's circumstances of who you represent, and some of it is just, hey, it's easier. I can have one fundraiser in Nashville and raise $100,000 and be done with it.
Yeah.
Or instead of spending 6 months, over the entire summer, begging and borrowing and stealing and calling and asking everybody that in your hometown to give you $25. The trade-off is when you do that, you do give up some autonomy. When people write you a check, they expect you to answer a phone call. And they expect you to return a text. And, it's not necessarily hey, I gave you money, so you need to vote for this, but it's, you need to meet with me and you need to hear what I have to say. And I don't care what your folks are telling you at home. You owe me a meeting. Stuff like that happens.
And they'd be less inclined to worry about you running for re-election if they wanted something now.
That's right.
All right. Republicans have been telling me that they're all in on turning Nashville red next year. You think this pile on the mayor, Freddie, for his illegal alien assistance is part of that strategy? There's Afton Ben up there, Heidi Campbell. Are they vulnerable, or is that waste of money?
Look, I think every candidate is vulnerable if they're facing the right opponent under the right circumstances. I would like to actually run against Heidi Campbell. I think it would be
I would too.
I think it'd be a very easy race to strike a difference in between her philosophy and mine. I think it'd be very easy to run against her record and what she hasn't done, what she hasn't accomplished. And there's votes that she's taken that would be very easy to beat her up over with moderate folks. You don't have to run in those districts and get the right to come out of the woodwork and show up. You have to play in the middle in those districts. You look at John Gillespie and what he's done in Memphis, in Shelby County, where he is. He does
or even Senator Pody, who has a little piece of Nashville.
These guys have different districts than mine. You know, you mentioned my district, 72%. Like Lewis County, again, one of the smallest counties in the state, but per capita voted for Trump more than anybody else, any other county in the state.
The whole state.
So my district is a 75% Republican district. I don't have to play in the middle. I can be who I am and who the people want me to be without worried about somebody coming in and trying to get in the middle and pull me in that direction. But if you're in a district like John Gillespie, then you have to really think about that. And I think that sometimes spills out in some of his votes, or maybe bills that he might support that he, does present not voting on instead of voting yes or no. So you have to think about those things as well.
World's greatest cop-out, present. I'm excited because next year there will be a new lieutenant governor, new governor. The sky is unlimited as Tennessee can take what's already great and either make it better or completely screw it up, and then all of a sudden we become Democrats. You ready to give it all up and go on the PGA tour with Rory? Or
No, I'm not I'm an old has-been player. You said I'm a 73 model. I'm what I do now, I own a business that runs a golf tour all over the country, and so I just try to give opportunities for other guys who love golf, and guys and gals actually that love golf, love competitive golf. They can't play softball or pick up basketball anymore because their knees or their back won't let them do that, but they can come out and compete and golf with their buddies and do that for a long time. And so that's my foray into the golf world right now.
Well, you want to run against Gloria for Senate if Marcia decides to step out?
I've been asked about stuff like that a lot. I was asked early on, well, how long you want to do this? How long you want to run for, be a state representative? I said, well, I'll do it as long as I feel like I'm effective for the people that I represent. But then recently, when Congressman Green was maybe not going to run again, and
that's my congressman.
Different folks have reached out, and when things like this perfect score come out, things like that, you get all the folks that want to pat you on the back and say, oh, you should go to D.C. We would like to have you in Congress, and or whatever the case may be. I could not think of anything worse.
I don't want you to go to D.C., Jerry. I want you to stay here. Help this state, not that country. Yeah.
Well, and it's, look.
Because you won't.
Again, I couldn't think of anything, or I couldn't imagine anything more frustrating than going to D.C.
Well, look at poor Tim Burchett, man.
Not being able to accomplish anything.
Yeah. Every night he goes on TikTok and he just says, thanks for sending me here, but man, we didn't do a darn thing today that's good for you.
Right. And as frustrated as I have been at times with my House Republican leadership, we have the ability to accomplish great things here. I personally have the ability to influence legislation and ideology and philosophy and try to push and pull things in a direction I think that the people in my district more reflect more accurately. I can't do that in D.C. So yeah, I don't have any interest in that. I think my
like the Mr. Smith
my highest and best
Washington.
use is right here.
They don't like Tennesseans up there as much as we think they do. Last question. Next session, I think things that didn't happen: Marcy's Law, crime victims' rights, Peace Act, hate crimes, which I don't understand because crimes are crimes. What are you most looking forward to next session, assuming that they let you off the bench and do something?
Well, I've got some things that are still left over that fortunately none of my bills got killed. They just got put on the bench, so they're all still alive for next year. So I'm still going after obscenity, people that are producing obscene materials and distributing that in the state. I've got a bill to try to make once again give power to the people, where you don't have to rely on a district attorney to sue someone or prosecute someone for a crime. I'm trying to create a civil right of action where you can sue those people for damages. I also have a pretty heavy bill dealing with abortion that I think is very important. It's going to be important for us to have the conversation to really dig down deep into the abortion industry in Tennessee. we have more abortions now than we had before the ban.
Really?
And we've got to do more than what we're doing. I mean, what we passed is great. It's certainly a step in the right direction, but we got to stop weakening that, and we really need to go in the other direction, and we need to make it a crime in Tennessee for everybody, not just doctors. Anybody that's involved in a criminal abortion, meaning that it was premeditated and not medically required. So
you have to designate it as murder.
That's right. And so, and unborn children need to have equal protection. In my mind, it's no different that if you kill a child in the womb than if you wait till it's born and you smother it in the crib. Murder is murder. You're killing a life regardless. And so that's going to be a big part of what I'm working on next year. So
wow.
I hope we get a lot of people talking about it and have some good conversation.
All right. Well, I'm here to help. That sounds fantastic. So thanks again for coming on.
Yes, sir.
Here.
My pleasure.
That is it for this episode. Thank you, Jody Barrett, for reminding us what Reagan said, conservatism forever. Yesterday was the Gipper's 21-year anniversary of his passing, June 5th, 2004, at age 93. We miss him, and his brand of populist conservatism has never been more needed in this country as we celebrate 249 years of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th next month. It's guys like Jody that keep the hope alive. Thank you for not California-ing our Tennessee and keeping Tennessee, Tennessee. Good luck with re-election and next session. I hope they treat you better up there. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. Peace in our time, and definitely G2G. Glory to God.
Yeah, I've been dreaming of the wild plains, walking where the pine trees dance.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of HeartlandJournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.